That's cool. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. It's great to have you all here for this session. Sadly, I wish I was sitting by the bay with Sara, having a lovely long drink after a lovely day at the SMS conference. But that's not to be. But this is. I won't say just as good, but it's really good. So thank you all for coming, and thank you all for tuning in and listening to us. You can tell how old I am, saying tuning in as if it's a radio. We wanted to do this session so our authors can interact with each other and also with you all, and really just to celebrate the 8 best papers from the 200 and something papers that we had submitted. These were the nominated 8 best. So we wanted to give them a chance to tell you a little bit about their research and give you a chance to sort of have a few Q&As with them. Unfortunately, because we're under so much time constraint, because we want to keep this under 60 minutes to keep your attention, essentially a lot of your questions will be using the chat feature, the little chat panel on your Zoom. I also wanted to introduce Sara Beckman. I'm Tyrone Pitsis. I'm from the Durham University Business School, and one of the co-chairs on the SMS conference, which was scheduled to be at Berkeley. We'll be doing a few different kinds of events around the conference online. So I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you interact with the other sessions as well. I'll pass you over to Sara, but a big shout out also to our co-chairs, Luciano Oviedo and Andy Dong. So Sara?
Sara actually had to drop off.
Oh, Sara dropped off. Oh, okay, no problem. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so I think what we'll do is go straight into the first paper. So you'll speak for 5 minutes, and we'll start with a paper by Beverly Rich, Roshan Nivendran, and Carl Meyer on adoption and acquisition, an example from the legal technology industry.
All right. Thank you all for being here virtually, and a huge thanks to SMS for organizing this session. This paper is a project with Roshan Nivendran at UVA, Kyle Mayer at USC, and in general, my research is at the intersection of contracts, technology, law, and innovation, so this fits right in. And without more preamble, I'll go for it. So AI is unique in that the product quality and the value that the individual customer receives from the product both increase as the customer's use increases. So once the customer uses the product more, the AI has more data, can make better predictions, the results are better. This benefits both the customer firm and the supplier or producer of the product. Despite this quality of AI, there's a lot of evidence that products with AI components do not make it past the pilot phase. That is, these products are never fully deployed or used throughout the organization on a long-term basis. So while AI is poised to add incredible value to the global economy, an estimated $15.7 trillion US by 2030, many customers that try out AI-enabled products simply do not use the products enough to prove to the organization that AI creates value. Indeed, 1 in 4 companies report a 50% failure rate of their AI pilot programs, and roadblocks to AI adoption have been widely noted. Tech adoption tends to be used in the literature as a dichotomous variable. Either the firm adopted the technology, usually meaning that they licensed it, or they did not adopt it, they didn't license it. But in terms of AI, something different seems to be happening. With AI, it seems that customer firms acquire the product but fail to actually use it. Our paper explores why. In part, there's a large variation in customer firms' capabilities, so usage does not always increase after acquisition. Firms don't always have the capabilities to create or even see the value from AI. The lack of full adoption here is a problem, and it suggests that there's an opportunity to add to knowledge of how firms, both customer firms and producer firms, can change their strategies to ensure full adoption that goes beyond the pilot, beyond just 1 year. We examine this in the legal technology context, a firm that we're calling Contract Intelligence, that develops AI contract review software. This product automates contract review, speeding up transaction time and reducing risk in transactions. Contract Intelligence gave us over 75 audio files from onboarding calls with new customers, in addition to a bunch of other data. We coded Contract Intelligence's onboarding call transcripts, which were on average over an hour long each, with multiple calls per customer, and interviews with Contract Intelligence executives and managers to build theory through an iterative process. We developed 4 categories of customer firms based on the core determinants of readiness and competence that came out of the data. Then we performed a topic modeling analysis on the transcripts to support the categories that we developed. Then we crafted propositions to theorize about the likelihood of full adoption for each category. Finally, based on the new data that we've just collected, we're still in the process of doing preliminary validation of each of these categories using outcomes from Contract Intelligence, such as usage, renewal rates, and product updates. From the open coding and topic modeling analyses, we found that firms consistently varied along 2 key dimensions: readiness and competence. Readiness refers to operational and psychological readiness, and competence refers to the firm's technical capabilities and their domain-specific sophistication, basically their absorptive capacity for technology adoption. Some firms are very clearly high in readiness, some were low, and the same for competence. Using these dimensions, we developed propositions about the likelihood of firms in each category fully adopting the AI product. And there's going to be a lot going on this slide. It was really hard to convey in 5 minutes the richness of the call transcript data. So we're just giving quick samples or just a glimpse of some of the quotes, and that's why they're so brief. So firms that were low in readiness and competence are status seekers. These are firms that are more interested in just appearing innovative rather than actually using the technology. We propose that these firms will not fully adopt the technology. The second category of firms are tinkerers. These are firms more interested in experimenting with the AI rather than actually deploying it in the organization. We propose that these firms will not fully adopt the technology. Third category is fast followers. These are firms that fully understand the technology, but they want to wait to fully deploy it until it is more widely used. They're technologically competent, but they have reservations. We propose that these firms will not fully adopt either. And finally, we propose that firms with high competence and high readiness, they'll fully adopt the product. These are serious users who want to fully implement in the near future. Currently, with the new data we've collected from Contract Intelligence, we're working on preliminary tests of these categories using the outcomes of customization of the product based on product updates made by Contract Intelligence, usage, and renewals. We've seen consistencies with our propositions, but also some interesting areas for more theoretical exploration, especially in terms of why status seekers tend to renew at high rates. This also has implications for AI adoption strategies for different types of firms in our categorization scheme. In conclusion, we believe that this paper addresses a theoretical and practical gap in the AI technology adoption and firm capabilities literatures. As AI becomes more widespread, it's increasingly important to identify strategies for overcoming firm capability deficits that may inhibit full adoption and, in effect, value created. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beverly. It's interesting, especially coming from doing a lot of work with the International Association for Contract and Commercial Management, where AI and contracting is quite a massive topic. We're doing quite a bit of work around that. If you're interested in that, just email me. But we do have a number of questions, which I hope that you'll be able to answer on the panel after this, because we don't really have time for answering live questions. And there's some really good questions there. I'll just ask one quick one: is did you notice different rates of adoption across different industries? So were some more likely to adopt AI?
That's a great question. We haven't fully gone through that data yet, but I believe, based on another paper that I'm also working on, there are differences across industries. And the data that we have from contract intelligence, the firms actually span a number of industries. So I think that we'll be able to make some interesting, draw some interesting insights from that as well. But I do think that there will be differences across industries.
Yeah, because some will be early adopters as well. So
exactly, and whether they're tech-oriented or law-oriented, and based on,
yeah. And there's probably country differences as well. So there are some great questions there for you. So I think you'll enjoy interacting with everyone on that.
I'm looking forward
so
to
thanks
it.
for those questions, everyone, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I told you it's a session on speed. And on to the next one. So our next paper is by Ouafaa and Lauren Lanahan, and it's explaining the tensions of substitution versus complementarity through an improved measure of local entrepreneurial activity.
Great, thanks, Farhan. Thank you everyone for being here. I'll be presenting work with Laura Lanahan on experimenting and failing as a means to success. We're examining the tension of complementarity and substitution with an improved measure or improved measures of entrepreneurial activity. So we all know entrepreneurship is an important engine of economic growth, and government policy shapes this institutional environment in which entrepreneurial decisions are made. But it is really unclear whether government policies truly spawn new entrepreneurial activity or if they merely substitute of other existing supports. This is obviously not a novel question, as it has been examined by multiple scholars with findings either supporting the complementarity or the substitution side. On the complementarity side, they argue that government funding increases the likelihood that firms will receive subsequent private financing, as it works as a signal from the government certifying the value of the firm, which then lowers information asymmetries and helps the venture gain legitimacy. On the substitution side, the argument is that public funding often attempt to encourage innovation and economic growth, focusing on social rates of return, which weakens the function of private investors to find, evaluate, and support prominent ventures. And as we examine these tensions in the literature, we find that both sides of the debate focus mainly on successful characteristics of the venture, such as patents, venture founding, and other similar practices, which does not really account for positive externalities of failure. And we're here really specifically talking about knowledge spillovers and learning effects, which are a key part of any entrepreneurial activity. And this is really important because while failed ventures presumably cannot learn from their own failures as they exit the market, their demises result in a positive externality, providing other ventures with an opportunity to observe, learn, and improve their own chances of success. What we really observe here is that this methodological bias is mainly due to a focus on firm-level analyses, which does not account for externalities. But if we aggregate that to the market level, we can account for spillovers and learning effects as positive externalities of venture and failure. So we do this by using, crowdfunding data, which is great to track both failed and successful entrepreneurial activity. We specifically track three weighted dependent variables: the total number of local entrepreneurial initiatives per 100,000 people. Then we do the same measure for failed and successful activity. So as we track these three DVs, we examine the effect of the State Small Business Credit Initiative, or SSBCI, on each of these variables. This is a $1.5 billion national program that entered different counties across the 50 states at different times between 2011 and 2016. So we utilized two model estimations, difference and differences, and fixed effects to examine the differential impacts of the SSBCI entry into a county compared to twin county in terms of unemployment rate, economic cluster strength, and metropolitan designation. What we find is that the differential impact of the SSBCI program on entrepreneurial activity for counties that implemented the program is associated approximately with 1.5 more campaigns per 100,000 people than compared with counties that did not implement the program, which really here speaks to the complementarity argument. But to bring clarity to the and breadth to the complementarity effect, we replicate the analysis by tracking successes and failures separately. And we find that the positive effect is mainly driven by field initiatives. So how do we explain this? We explain this by considering the role of Slack resources in venture experimentation. And these are locally available and flexible resources that permit experimentation regardless of the level of perceived risk related to the entrepreneurial initiative. So overall, our improved measures of entrepreneurial activity substantiates our argument to consider the collective portfolio of entrepreneurial activity, including successes and failures. We do highlight that these findings do not identify when the substitution mechanism predominates. However, we do assert that the complementarity mechanism predominates when we consider entrepreneurial experimentation as an integral part of any entrepreneurial activity. This is really important for policymakers as it shows that an increase in venture creation is not the only way entrepreneurial policies can enhance local entrepreneurial activity, because having an impact on the collective activity, including successes and failures, also produces value. And government policies can have a catalyzing effect as they affect the incentives for initiating entrepreneurial projects and contribute indirectly to different positive externalities, which then promotes the overall entrepreneurial activity. Thank you.
So our next presentation is Getting on the Map, the Impact of Online Listings on Business Performance, written by Michael Luca, Abhishek, Nagaraj, and Gary Suvarami. All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much to the organizers for inviting us to this innovative format. This work is co-authored with Michael Luca, who's at Harvard Business School, and Gauri Subramani, who's a job market candidate from Berkeley. He'll be on the market this year. So to start our paper, imagine that you're in downtown Austin in June 2010 at the intersection of 6th and Trinity Street, and you're in the mood for a beer. And you search on Yelp for a pub, and you get these 4 options, of which Waller and Maggie May seems to be the highly rated. Now, the literature that looks at the impact of online platforms on these kinds of local businesses has mostly looked at features such as the information about the product, the reviews, the ratings, in deciding whether you choose between one option or the other. Now, what if I told you that right on that corner, there's another place called Moose Knuckle Pub that is beloved by the locals, number 17 here on the map, that doesn't even show up on the Yelp map. In fact, this place, even though it was founded in 2004, will not get added to Yelp till July of 2010. Now, this is just one anecdotal example, but so far, most of the literature on this topic has assumed that all places in the real world are represented on online platforms. And so the real question is Moose Knuckle an outlier, a minority? Or what % of businesses in the real world are even represented or missing from online platforms? Having established this baseline, the heart of our paper then looks at the performance consequences of online representation for a local business. Why is it that Moose Knuckle is not listed on Yelp, even though it's free to do so and doesn't take a lot of time? One option is that businesses are rationally avoiding online platforms because they're worried that they might get bad reviews. The other would be that these businesses are underestimating this strategy. Online representation has potential benefits that the businesses don't recognize. Our work hopes to shed light on both of these margins. Now, the first challenge in establishing the % of businesses missing is one needs a measure of ground truth beyond Yelp. In order to do that, we rely on administrative data on monthly tax receipts for the state of Texas for 26,000 businesses. As you can see, no one can escape the taxman, and Moose Knuckle Pub is in there. The second benefit of this is it also gives us a really great measure of performance, monthly revenues, right? So you can see in the first month in these data sets, Moose Knuckle is making about $70,000 a year. Now we match these data with proprietary data obtained from Yelp. We work with them directly on their business listings over time. That allows us to go back and construct a measure of coverage and quantify the percent of places that look like Moose Knuckle and the percent of places that are on Yelp just fine. We thought a few places might be missing, but the number that we discovered was truly surprising, even to us. About 40% of businesses, about 10,500 businesses, did not have a listing by December of 2017, pretty recently. And even if a place was listed, the lag to listing was about 13 months for the median place and 42 months on average. This number varied quite a bit depending on what part of Texas you were, but at least we saw a variation between 1.8 to 5 years in lags, even when a place was listed. So having established this baseline, we then turn to our core question, which is, does this matter? Is it harmful for businesses? Are these businesses rationally avoiding online platforms? In order to do so, we use a difference in difference framework with business and month fixed effects. But in addition to that, we use a natural experiment, where on a single day in July 2010, Yelp acquired a bunch of business listings, which led to 1,100 new places being added to Yelp on the very same day. So if a business's performance changes before and after this, we can know it's the causal effect of just the listing and nothing else that happens along with it at the same time. What do we find? Are these businesses rational in avoiding these platforms, or are they missing out? We find that they're missing out. Online representation increases business performance by 5 to 12%. In fact, the average business is leaving about $25,000 to $50,000 a year on the table according to these estimates. And as these event study charts show, these are indeed causal effects of the value of being added to Yelp. Before being added to Yelp, there doesn't seem to be any pre-trend. So what are the takeaways from this work? What we find is a large number of businesses do not have a digital presence to this day, and that improving online presentation offers a cheap but effective way for firms to increase business performance. The next time you want to think about these online platforms, think about them as affecting firm outcomes, not only by reviews and ratings, but also by mere inclusion. If you're in Austin again, and if you see only these two options, remember that you might want to look around. Not everything is represented on the map, and that matters both for you as a customer, but also for the business. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
Oh, Javier just asked the question I was about to ask you. That's freaky. Well, sort of, yeah. What do you think would be the net effect after costs of listing?
The net effect, in what sense? So we identify that after, so costs of listing in this case are minimal. So anyone can list on Yelp for free, and it's quite instantaneous. It takes a few hours at most. And so basically what we're showing is businesses are basically leaving money on the table. We think this is a combination of not being informed. So meeting a lot of these businesses are minority owned and don't understand the value of digital and digital strategies. And some portion of this could be apprehension about negative reviews. But we show even for places that end up with only 2 stars, which is quite low, simply being included outweighs the negative benefits of getting negative reviews. So almost all of the benefits that we identify are net of costs because the costs are very low.
Right. Okay. There's some great questions there. Some of them I was going to ask you, but unfortunately we have to move on.
we can answer them on the platform offline.
Yes, and I'll put my questions up there as well. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, we'll move straight on to Alexander Murray and Farhan Iqbal on how early stage ventures manage internal legitimacy jolts with initial resource providers. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfect.
Awesome. Sweet. Hey, everyone. My name is Farhan Iqbal. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Georgia. And I'm excited to present our paper titled How Early Stage Ventures Manage Internal Legitimacy Jolts with Initial Resource Providers. With me on this project are Alex Murray at the University of Oregon and Susan Cohen at the University of Georgia. With that being said, let's get right into it. So early stage ventures face this liability of newness. And in an effort to signal normalcy and appropriateness, they establish initial projections of their intended future states. However, given these future states are merely projections, they're oftentimes wrong. Ventures invariably need to refine or readjust their strategy implementation to overcome the challenges they face. And their financial backers need to trust or maybe even hope that they can do so. We call these challenges legitimacy jolts because they influence stakeholders' perceptions of the venture's normalcy. These can be both external or internal. In this paper, we focus on internal because founders have more agency over how and when that information is distilled, which gives them these sort of degrees of freedom in strategically managing their communications. Taking this nuanced perspective allows us to extend research on the process by which ventures find success in executing their strategies, as opposed to simply planning their strategies. So this brings about an interesting question to us, which is, how do entrepreneurs maintain stakeholder support in the face of internal legitimacy jolts? Since extant theory has little guidance, to investigate further, we use a multi-method approach where we first abduct theory with a qualitative approach and then test it quantitatively. Both of our studies are in the context of Kickstarter for a few reasons. First, crowdfunding efforts clearly rely on projective claims that set stakeholders or backers' expectations. Second, entrepreneurs promise to deliver a future product within a specific timeline that we can measure. And third, the interactions between founders and backers are easily observable on the platform. So in study one, which again was our abductive approach, we took about 160 interviews and used a grounded theoretical approach to identify 3 potential mechanisms that entrepreneurs could use. And you can see these on the table on the left. So the first is fostering vicarious experience, which we define as frequently updating and engaging stakeholders throughout the startup process to create a feeling of partaking in the startup's ongoing development. The second, which we label evoking understanding, is transparently discussing the challenges facing the venture as they actually occur to encourage backers to sympathize with them. And the third, which we label consistency, is leveraging the first 2 strategies throughout the campaign, both before and after the legitimacy jolt. So you can see this model here on the right side of the screen where consistency is our moderator. I want to point out that we use stakeholder support as our dependent variable because it's the outcome that founders articulated throughout our interviews with them. We'll measure it using the sentiment of backers' comments, where more favorable comments signal more stakeholder support. Which leads me into study 2, which was our deductive approach. So we test these hypotheses with a random sample of ventures launched in Kickstarter in 2016. We collected about 57,000 updates and comments across over 400 ventures that underwent an internal legitimacy jolt, which we identified as simply missing its latest deadline. On the left of this slide, we have our measurements. So we measure fostering vicarious experience as the frequency at which founders provide updates. We measure evoking understanding as a concreteness of the language used by founder statements, and we use the linguistic category model to do so. And we measure consistency using the difference of each of the first 2 strategies before and after the legitimacy jolt occurred. And on the right, we have the results of our hypothesis test. So we find full support for both H1 and H3A. We find initial support for H2, but that goes away in the full model. And we do not find support for H3B. So overall, mixed results suggesting that maybe these strategies aren't fully effective despite entrepreneurs thinking they are. I think this paper makes multiple contributions. So here are 3 of them. First, we extend research on understanding how ventures retain stakeholder support when the nature of the jolt is internal as opposed to external. Second, the paper highlights the importance of bringing stakeholders along through the dynamic journey of these legitimacy jolts. And finally, the paper provides an opportunity for future research on strategy implementation, which is a great complement to the extant focus on strategy formation. With that, thank you for your time, and we'll be happy to answer any questions either here or via the platform.
Thank you so much. It's really interesting. I'm getting the push ahead from Robin. So we have to move straight to the next paper. But I'll make sure I'm going to ask you several questions online, and I think people are already asking you questions. So really interesting as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go straight on to Jared, Damon, Eric Knight, and Stefan Masek, all from Sydney. I can hear Jared is starting to get the Australian twang in there, so he's been there long enough. Straight over to you onto how material practices allow middle managers to manage paradoxical tensions, video-ethnography of a digital bank. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's morning our time. Thank you for tuning in, to use your phrase, Tyrone. In this paper, yeah, as Tyrone said, we look at how the material practices of middle managers enable them to manage paradoxical tensions. And paradoxical tensions in organizations are contradictory yet interdependent tensions which occur simultaneously and which then also persist over time. And our data that we draw on in this paper is collected via an ethnography over 34 months at a digital bank. And in this paper, we draw mainly on data from 23 meetings, which we videoed, covering about 43 hours. And these were product development meetings. And the tension that the participants were wrestling with in the meeting was how to simultaneously embed both complexity and simplicity in a digital banking product, as well as deliver both short-term and long-term benefits. Now, there's a lot of detail given us an ethnographic study, so I have to just present a fairly high-level overview, but happy to take questions following the presentation. So I'll skip right ahead to our data structure. So we coded from our video data, starting with first order codes of micro-material practices that we observed, which we aggregated into 4 material practices, as you can see in the screen, which we then followed through in terms of their connection to the paradoxes at play. We draw this together in a conceptual model, which I'll spend most of my time talking to. So different combinations of these material practices combined in different ways. And so the first one here, moving from left to right, is that tensions in the meetings were surfaced by using materials to either present or capture information, and then collectively interacting with that information. And doing so, we saw materialize or make, or to surface tensions that were underpinning the development of the product. We then saw a different combination of material practices combine, where the participants would interrogate the materials and also structure these materials differently. So I'll give you an example of rearranging post-it notes on a board. So that would be an example of structuring the materials. Both those 2 sets of practices were performed by both frontline employees and middle managers together. But the next set of practices were combined by middle managers only. And so here we saw middle managers almost exert their managerial authority to structure materials and drive consolidation of understanding those materials amongst the group. And we saw how this could be done in a way which could, what we call, progress understanding of the tensions by either merging or balancing or reframing those tensions, but they could also defer interaction with those tensions to a later stage, and in doing so prioritize one pole over another in terms of the paradox, or they might separate or delay interaction with these tensions. And at this stage, we kind of postulate that there be deferring those tensions for intervention from senior managers. So in my final few seconds, I'll talk through some of the findings in terms of the role of middle managers in dealing with paradoxes. So what we show in this paper is that managers can reconstruct the environment of these meetings through their material artifacts. I put some examples there on the slide. And this reconstruction can serve to render tensions salient to meeting participants. We therefore argue that middle managers are discursive material agents, kind of building on prior literature which focuses more on the discursive element of the work of middle managers. Here we show that they are builders who materially craft, quite literally, significant responses to tensions in organizations. And therefore middle managers play an important role by not just rendering these tensions salient, but also setting them up or readying them for interaction or intervention by senior managers. And finally, middle managers can intervene early in these contradictions before they reach senior managers, and therefore filter some of the noise that senior managers experience. So showing that they're not just discursive translators of knowledge, but they can have a more proactive involvement in this important phenomenon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jared. I'm getting the roll-up from Robert again. Again, really interesting. I've got 1,000 questions. I wish I had more time to ask questions, because I wanted to ask a question on novel material. So the creation of new materials to construct meaning. Anyway, but we can talk about that later. So let's move on. And we'll go now to Johannes Loh and Tobias Keshmer on micro-competition in platform markets, coordination and motivation of video game wiki contributors. Thank you.
So, hello, my name is Johannes. I'm a PhD student at LMU Munich. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to present to you this joint project with Tobias Keshmer, who is my PhD advisor at LMU Munich. So when we think about micro-competition in platform markets, we're studying competition between platforms of a very particular type. And this is platforms that heavily rely on contributions by users like you and me to create any value. Think about Wikipedia, for example, entirely user-driven. Aside from their increasingly important role in today's digital economy, across a vast amount of different areas, such platforms have some interesting characteristics worth studying. So first of all, users who contribute their knowledge and skills are typically free of pecuniary incentives, right? And they can freely join any platform they wish at any time. And this creates a situation that if multiple platforms offer the same or similar services, one key resource they have to compete for are those users and their contributions, right? And so if you want to study the competition between the users, it's basically an essential part of it to also study the behavior of the contributing users. And of particular interest here is what kind of mechanisms we might be able to identify that tie this macro level concept of platform competition to micro level outcomes. And we want to address this to some extent by asking the question, how does the activity of a platform's users depend on its competitive position vis-a-vis, well, its competitors? So here's what we look at. Well, first of all, we say that the total user activity can be disaggregated into two parts. First of all, you have the number of contributors, right? So the extensive margin of activity. And the other part is the activity per user, so the intensive margin. So the one is, the more users you have, the more content will be created, and the more each of those users does the same, the more content will be created. And now, how does the competitive position of a platform may have play a role here? Well, first of all, we posit that it plays a role in terms of user coordination. Before a user joins any platform, she or he has to decide which platform to join and to contribute. And we would argue that this would primarily affect the number of users a platform has, right? Once a user decided for a platform to contribute to, it becomes a problem of user motivation. So how much to contribute and how frequently to contribute, which then of course feeds into the intensive margin of activity. And jointly, those two will determine the overall value created on the platform. So we study those dynamics in the context of two competing game wiki platforms, Gamepedia and Fandom. And those platforms very much look like Wikipedia. So users go out, they gather information about contents of video games in this context, and write articles to be consumed by, you and I, or anybody who has an interest in the game. However, in contrast to Wikipedia, for example, that is this one giant repository of general knowledge, the platforms we study consist of multiple disconnected wikis covering different games and being maintained by disconnected user communities, actually. And this creates some interesting heterogeneity in each platform's competitive position across those different knowledge domains, i.e. the games. In our empirics, we face a non-trivial challenge, and that is that we want to explore the effect of the competitive position on user activity and not vice versa. For this reason, we use a quasi-experimental design where we exploit game updates as a source of exogenous variation or an exogenous impulse to user activity. And what we then do is we basically estimate average treatment effects of those updates and evaluate effect heterogeneity along each platform's competitive position within a domain. We have 4 key findings. First of all, a better competitive position, so a more dominant position of a platform, entails a higher level of user activity and productivity on aggregate. Second, this advantage is primarily driven by the extensive margin of activity. So a more dominant platform simply has more users at any point in time that contribute. Thirdly, we also find a weak effect at the intensive margin. So on a more dominant platform, each and every user does a little bit more than on a less dominant platform. However, this advantage completely vanishes as soon as we control for spillovers from the extensive margin. And lastly, we find that user heterogeneity matters as well. So if we look at highly productive users that belong to the top decile in terms of contributions to a wiki, we still have those positive effects at the intensive margin for more dominant platforms, even after controlling for changes at the extensive margin. And this is the paper in the nutshell. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Johan. Sorry, just one sec. My computer's playing up. Okay, can you hear me? Oh, good. Okay, excellent. Good. How are we doing for time, Robin?
Keep moving.
Oh, good.
All right, thank you so much.
Sorry.
Okay. All right, I'll get a question in eventually. All right. Thank you so much. We'll move on. We'll now move on to utilizing design to advance strategy as practice research, methodological choices and implications by Jan Auernhammer and Carl Werner.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sharon. We are presenting today a paper which is a self-reflection of our methodological choices and their implications. In this paper, we outline how design research can be a powerful lens to advance strategy as practice research. We would like to start with a metaphor of two office towers to compare strategy and design research. Design is used as a metaphor to discuss strategic planning and thinking. Traditionally, strategic research asks what is questions to understand actual strategizing. In contrast, design asks what if questions, which consider strategic interventions and impact. According to Olikovsky, SAP research has been conducted with various research methodologies. Practice as perspective empirically examines agency that produces social structure. These practices shape reality. Practice as phenomenon uses methods such as ethnography to study tacit knowing, situated experiences, and reflection of individual strategists. Whereas practice as philosophy examines the shifting relationships between people and technologies. Instead, these practices are reality. In design, Cross discussed similar philosophical choices. Design science formulates rational design methods and systematic ways of designing. These design methods tackle well-formulated problems. Whereas design as a discipline focuses on complex problems in high uncertainty. Using methods such as protocol analysis, we can study the designer's competence, thinking, and activities. Design research uses a means-end analysis to study people, problem situation, and design outcomes. By researching strategic interventions, we can evaluate the impact in new problem situations. Each of these choices have important implications. The first choice generates sophisticated theories in stable situation and well-defined problems. Practice is understood intellectually, but lacks practical knowledge about the actual doing. The second choice centers on practitioners' experience in complex situations when uncertainty is high. However, it is difficult to generate sophisticated theories from these individual experiences. The third choice examines intervention practices to create actionable knowledge. Design research does not falsify, but determines what is satisfactory. Design research invents new strategy making. Each choice produces specific types of knowledge. This knowledge is utilized in education and practice. The first choice provides theories, frameworks, analytical tools to intellectually debate strategy in classroom and meeting rooms. Studio, common in engineering, arts, and architecture, support experiential learning. In strategy, design thinking classes provide workshop environments to experiment with strategy. Real-world conditions are needed to design intervention and experience impact. For example, this can be accomplished by letting students redesign university businesses. Students can experience and learn that their decisions and actions have real-world consequences. We argue, to educate the whole strategist, we must combine different perspectives. To conclude, it is no wonder that Mintzberg argued that business schools teach design as analysis and need to recognize human intervention as practice in strategy. Thank you very much for your attention, and we would welcome any questions and comments. We hope this paper will spark a discussion of how we can enable the whole strategist.
Thank you so much. It's really interesting. So it's every paper is sort of elicited so many questions from me. I'm just checking that Robin is not giving me the okay, good. I might ask a quick question, but again, look out for the questions online. I was wondering if you engage with the work of Richard Sennett.
I have not, but that's an
Okay.
interesting one. I would love to follow up on that one.
Yeah, if you look at sort of the working in the craftsman, the other person I recommend you look at is a philosopher from the US, Thomas Alexander, and particularly look at the pragmatic imagination.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, and well, it was more a comment than a question, but anyway, I better move on. I will send you a couple of questions via email anyway.
Please do.
But
So
I've read all your papers, so thank you so much. So we now go with our last paper, Violina, Rindova, and Louis Martins. And this one is, why does strategy need design theory? A framework for developing strategy through design thinking. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very excited to be part of this session. Thank you, SMS, for organizing such a stimulating gathering. And Jan's talk was better than perfect in terms of setting up the question and the presentation that I'm going to give. So this is work with my former colleague at UT Austin, Louis Martins. And Louis and I have both taught on the intersection of strategy, entrepreneurship, and innovation, and have used design thinking, which led us to ask a design thinking question with regard to strategies. What if strategies could be designed? And we looked at the literature, and we found out that the literature does believe that strategies are designed. Rommel is famously quoted that when people talk about managers as decision makers, they're really not talking about master strategists. Master strategists are designers. And the design and strategy are analogous domains that deal with similar ill-defined wicked problems. That sounded good, except that when we looked at more closely at how we think about design, and I'm going to use similar analogy from architecture, we realized that when we in strategy think about design, we often think about different dimensions of value. We think about efficiency, reliability, scale, quality, a variety of very valuable dimensions in terms of value creation that don't necessarily fully incorporate the hallmark logic of design, and in particular design thinking, which is about creativity and offering novel solutions. So we asked, again, the what if question, by thinking, what if strategies could be designed with the distinctive logic of design, which really led us to our paper, which focuses on how can we incorporate the work in design theory, in design thinking, most directly in strategizing, kind of the core strategy making process. If we did that, would strategies be as creative and compelling and really transformative in terms of how we think about problems and the environment, like this iconic example of Frank Lloyd Wright's building incorporating the environment? Would they become more aspirational frameworks for value creation that profoundly change beliefs about what's possible and what is value, both at consumer as well as at investor level? And what we conclude with the framework that we developed, that I will share quickly with you, is that if strategies are designed, we introduce this notion of design strategies similar to design houses, they will be more distinctive, they will have higher level of novelty, they will be more livable, metaphorically speaking, they will be more human-centered and stakeholder-centered, they will be more futuristic, they will have greater futurity in the strategic thinking embedded in them, and they will have more openness or more flexibility in terms of accommodating shifting characteristics in the environment. And since I have already previewed the conclusions of the paper, I also thought I will preview the caveats that one might ask, is design theory really going to also beget strategies that are potentially unusual, or maybe even weird, or even questionable, right? Which is always the flip side of creativity. And our answer to this is that even if some of these strategies may appear out of the norm, they actually can be significantly beneficial in terms of giving firms opportunities to tap into resources or to address environments that are normally outside the domain of competition or the framework of competition in a particular industry. So this is the background, and with this in mind, we went on a search for a comprehensive design approach. Lots has been written on design thinking, including among the organizers of this conference, and our interest was to discover a more comprehensive approach that puts together ideas from design thinking and design reasoning and design theory. And we came across this framework from architecture, which focuses on, intends to offer a comprehensive view of design by articulating 5 design beginnings. So this is the background framework for our thinking. And I use this picture here because it illustrates very well the core idea of design as a highly integrated, highly recursive process that encompasses a number of very important set of considerations with strategy research. What we do in the paper is we work through those 5 design beginnings, and we develop a full framework for strategizing that represents in the outer circle the design beginnings that you saw in the design framework that we use as a point of departure. Then we elaborate the processes associated with these design beginnings, building on that framework as well as the broader design literature that Jan also previewed. And then we move toward the inner circle where we incorporate design ideas into the strategizing process, and in the center are the strategic effects of design strategies that I already previewed for you. So with a short time, I'm going to go very quickly through our logic, and we'll be delighted to answer questions offline and on the platform. So the first design beginning, what is called image of the world, is actually refers to the worldview that informs the perspective of a decision maker. In design theory, the notion of a worldview is very well elaborated in the concept of design philosophy. In strategy, when we think about the worldview, we have primarily focused on the mental models of strategists, and our 2 core frameworks for thinking of this have been bounded rationality, which emphasizes the simplicity of these representations relative to the environment, and strategic cognition, which recognize this idiosyncrasy of knowledge that generate distinctiveness, but also sees them as highly static. So when you bring the notion of design philosophy to the worldview of the strategist, a core attribute that emerges is the notion of a distinctive perspective. The view of the strategist as a theorist, which also has been recently advanced in strategy, not in terms of accuracy, but more of providing a differentiated understanding. The next component of our framework is the notion of challenge opportunity sets, which are what are the corners of the universe, the parts of the world that are more malleable, that we would think about them as disrupted or currently in state of flux, that allow for the kind of intervention that Jan articulated as core to a design process. Designers address this, this problem by essentially making abductive conjectures about problem solution sets. And it is well understood that design really thinks about problem solving as a solution-centered strategy. In strategic research, when we think about exploring the environment from the perspective of challenge and opportunity, we very much think about probabilistic and cognitive search, both of which are constrained in the ways I articulated earlier. So adopting the notion of abductive search, similar to what qualitative researchers do, which was also illustrated earlier, will provide strategy with an opportunity to think about generate multiple directions of exploration and work with provisional explanations to generate subsequent action. I'm just going to quickly mention here that Peirce, who developed the notion of abduction, actually argues that abduction is the only form of reasoning that is equipped to deal with novelty. And from that perspective, incorporating the notion of abductive search will fundamentally inform strategic research about a structured way for exploring novelty. Design beginning number 3 in that framework is the notion of vision, or how do you create an image of the world. Designers are extremely adept at using design metaphors, and they rely on them to generate different visions in terms of possible integrations and configurations of existing relationships to create novel interdependencies. In strategy, the notion of vision has been used. Sometimes it's considered to be kind of in the soft toolkit, but generally is understood as some future view of the world. Bringing into strategy the design perspective focuses a lot more on multiplicity of conceptions, including conceptions of the desirable. Thinking about how values, principles, or the possibilities embedded in different metaphors can inform a different view, right? A different conception of a future state of the world. Next is objectives. It is something that we in strategy research consider at one of the fundamental elements of strategy. But again, the view that comes from design theory and strategy is pretty different in this point. Objectives in design theory have to do with organizing systemic relationships among multiple stakeholders. That is central to the notion of design from a client perspective, or kind of from a stakeholder or from a societal perspective. In contrast, in strategy, objectives are largely understood as the goal-setting processes of the dominant coalition. And of course, this is a simplification, but that gives us the general tendency in the definitions of goals and objectives in strategy. Bringing design theory to the definition of strategic objectives clearly speaks to the opportunities generated by stakeholder inclusion. This is a vibrant area of research. I'm not going to spend more time on it. I'm simply highlighting how we can build on design theory to bring together two core areas in research. And finally, the notion of forms is, of course, the core, a core process in design, if not the core process in design. And you can think about this as the variety of visual and material representations through which designers explore both problems and solutions and evolve their understanding about the nature of the problem. In strategy, we also think about forms, but generally our default notion of a form is final product. And if you don't believe me, I can share the perspective of our reviewers on this paper. So expanding the notion of form and embodiment and material representation in process of strategy making has been on the research of the strategy of practice agenda. And this research can be significantly enriched by the extensive thinking and theory development that has been done in the field of design around forms as both epistemic objects, which means to learn more about the problem, as well as boundary objects, which means ways to communicate design ideas across the different stakeholder communities, for example, that would be involved in an inclusive stakeholder process. This was a very quick overview of the theoretical framework. I'm just quickly going to highlight some key implications around creativity in strategy, balancing foresight and learning, stakeholder inclusion, and potentially a new way of thinking about the origins of great strategies. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I think we won't have time for questions for that, but they are streaming in. Thank you so much for that. I'll now pass over to Robin.
Sure. So at the beginning of the session, we said we'd let everyone pick their choice for the best presentation. So on your screen, you should have a poll. You can, they're listed in order of presentation. So go ahead and you can start voting for your choice. Oops, let me relaunch it. Your choice of the best presentation.
Make sure you scroll down as well. So
yes, there are 8 of them.
Yeah.
Okay, Tyrone, as they're rolling in, do you want to announce the best paper prize winner?
Yeah, sure. Very happy to do that. I'm really pleased to announce the best paper. So we were sent a set of papers listed as best papers, and then the 4 judges had to read them all and then rank them. And as you can see from the presentations, it wasn't easy. The winner of the best paper for the special conference is our final speaker, actually. Why does strategy need design theory? A framework for developing strategy through design thinking. So Violina and Louis, congratulations. It's a really great paper, really interesting. All the papers really elicited many questions as we were reading them. But I think this had, some very interesting insights there. And there was bits in there that I really agreed with, and there were bits that I had some questions over. But it really was a great paper. So thank you to all final 8 of you, but especially congratulations to the 2 of you.
Okay, and the results are in from a poll. So it looks like the audience choice is getting on the map the impact of online listings on business performance. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your day at the end or the start, in the middle of it, to join us. You will be getting a survey when you exit, so please do give us feedback, and we hope you join us for our next session.
Yeah.